Well, when we're talking about project's impact potential, we're essentially talking about the ability of the project to contribute to one or more of the fund level impacts. That is the Green Climate Fund's strategic mitigation or adaptation impact areas. For an adaptation project, you essentially need to demonstrate the contribution towards increased resilience of a population or group of people. On the other hand, for a mitigation project, you need to demonstrate the level of reduced or avoided greenhouse gas emissions. When we want to demonstrate impact potential, essentially we need to think about how to target GCF investments for greater impact. GCF board documents and our own experience points to the removal of barriers, especially within the public policy and regulatory framework domains that could really help to mobilise private capital and institutional investors at scale. What's important to note is that the GCF board have been quite critical of earlier projects submitted for approval in terms of their potential for climate impact, which in certain cases hasn't sufficiently been developed or well connected to the proposed activities of those projects. This was particularly in the case of adaptation projects, where the climate-related objectives of certain projects was not sufficiently clear and the impacts of GCF funding was in question. In these cases, project developers need to think about how best to show there are clear impact pathways. In effect, say for an adaptation project, this means estimating the likely impact of climate events on assets, economic production and demand, as well as health and well-being. Then there's a need to demonstrate our adaptation impact potential. For this, we can look at how our adaptation measures can prevent or reduce these losses and impacts. Essentially here we are asking, what is our adaptation strategy and how specifically does it articulate improved resilience? The indicator here is of course the number of people benefiting from improved resilience, and we can also use economic indicators, say for example of more resilient economies to the effects of climate change. These would be such things as trade benefits or financial indicators such as cost savings potential or prevention of economic losses. For a mitigation project, on the other hand, our project impact is a lot more about demonstrating how a project removes persistent barriers or addresses particular regulatory, technical or financial constraints that would prevent greenhouse gas emissions from being reduced, or locks these economies into an emissions-intensive pathway or trajectory. The most obvious measure for mitigation projects is the expected direct and indirect emissions reductions, and we can also think about sequestration and use some of the economic indicators I suggested for adaptation as well. Did you know that over 98% of our projects have actually been successfully funded by major donors, including the Green Climate Fund? Why don't you head on over to our website now to learn about how we can get your project funded.